Hi, I'm Joe Atkinson. I'm a co-founder at Lineup Ninja, and we make speaker management software for conferences and exhibitions. We're an official supplier for EventTech Live, and today I'm going to talk about smart agenda planning technology and how that's changing how we plan event content. It's a pre-recorded session with live Q&A, so if you've got any questions, stick them in the chat. I'll be lurking there and I'll try and answer your questions as best I can. And also, I believe if you're watching on demand later, I get a notification. So if you put your questions in, I should be able to answer them as soon as I can. So don't be shy with your questions. Okay. So by the end of this session, you will understand what smart agenda planning is, how it helps event planners, and how EventTech Live used it this year. So we're going to have a bit of a case study. Okay, so let's dive in. What is it? Now, to understand that, we need to have a bit of a simplified view of the kind of traditional agenda planning processes. And when I say agenda planning, I mean kind of gathering and organizing all the content for events like conferences and exhibitions. So typically for a conference, the process will be something like recruiting your keynote speakers for the conference, and often in parallel with that will be like a call for papers, so sometimes called abstract submission and review. And that's all kind of going on at the beginning of the process. When you've decided, you've booked your keynote speakers, you've decided which abstracts you're going to accept for your conference, then you move on to scheduling all those sessions onto your agenda, confirming details and practicalities with speakers, and then you can move on from there to notwithstanding any late-breaking research or last-minute changes, you can move on to publishing your agenda to really to drive attendance and get your attendees excited and get people booking. And you can do that through event website, delegate apps, and often for academic conferences in an abstract book as well. So exhibitions, I've got like a kind of bit of a blurred line between conferences and exhibitions here. So when I say exhibitions, I'm talking about the learning program at an exhibition. Sometimes that's called a conference. Sometimes conferences have exhibitions as part of them. Sometimes it's vice versa. But really what I'm talking about here is trade shows, consumer shows, the more kind of commercial kind of events where they've still got a program of lots of sessions where people are learning. And what we're seeing there is it's not as clear a picture. There are lots of different processes that event organizers use. Some of them use multiple processes, and everyone uses slightly different combinations of them. So I'm going to have a quick run through those. Again, you're going to have recruiting keynote speakers, and then you've got to capture all their biographical and the talk details, and then you'll have to schedule their session, or possibly you schedule their session when you book them and then capture all the stuff later. They may also have an open call for speakers, very similar to the call for papers, but there won't be the really formal abstract kind of peer review or scientific academic review of the submitted paper. So it might just be someone from the event planning team looking down, reading what people have submitted and saying yes, no, yep, fine, great. Or they may see some submitted offers and think, well, looks okay. They've never spoken at our event before. Don't know if they're any good or not. And someone else has offered a very similar session. Let's collate some of those offers into a panel session, and then that later gets scheduled as well. A process that we see quite a lot of exhibition planners use is like an editorially generated session process where they'll have some industry or sector experts who will say, well, these are the hot topics in our industry this year, so we want sessions on these different topics, and they'll write the titles and possibly even the session descriptions. And then the organizing team will go out and recruit the speakers for those. So sometimes those sessions will be scheduled right at the start of the process. Sometimes they'll be scheduled later when you've spoken to speakers and found out what their availability is. Similar kind of thing for some panels are organized in this editorial way. And then the panelists and the moderators and so on are recruited. Finally, for trade shows, often they will have sessions which they sell to exhibitors or sponsors. And these will often be scheduled first, and the kind of the best ones, the ones in the biggest venues and at the best times of the day, might command a higher price. So they're all scheduled first and then sold. And the ones which are in the kind of the small dingy room out the back, and it's the graveyard shift after lunch, they might be a bit cheaper. So anyway, those sessions might be scheduled first. Then when they get sold, there'll be a process of asking the sponsor or exhibitor to then submit what their talk details are, so they can then be reviewed, just to make sure that they meet the show's editorial guidelines and there isn't too much kind of selling from the stage. Once that's all done and you've got your first draft of your agenda, you can then publish that to your event website, visitor app, and possibly on-site digital signage as well. Okay, so there's lots of good software out there already, which kind of offers event managers lots of support for various different areas of these processes, particularly things like abstract submission and review. There's some great products out there, some of whom are exhibiting here at Event Tech Live. And then also, event website, delegate apps, visitor apps, tons of people offering that kind of thing. However, there seems to be a bit of a gap around the scheduling task. And so that leaves a lot of event planners having to do that themselves, either using spreadsheets or even for some of these abstract submission and review products, they'll have an agenda builder, but it's basically just holding the sessions in place. It's not actually helping the scheduling side of things. So that leaves event planners with a process that looks something a bit like this. And this might be a team that does it, or it might be an individual. It might be done with Post-it notes. It might be in a spreadsheet or on one of these agenda building applications. But it still leaves this thought process in the planner's head, which is, which session can go where? Okay, so you're building up the agenda, and then you get to like, oh, hang on, such and such a speaker said they can't do this day. Oh, but we had to put it there because it was the last slot with a decent, a room with decent Wi-Fi. Oh, right, okay. So in that case, what else can we move? Well, we could move Ian to Ali's slot and then move Ali to the Tuesday. Oh, no, that means there's going to be 3 finance sessions all at the same time. Okay, how about we put Ali in room 4? Oh, no, that means Ali's on a panel at the same time. So there's lots of this kind of scheduling complexity, which is being done in the heads of event planners. Now, you might say, okay, that has been a problem historically. But post-COVID, everything's going to be hybrid events. We might well be looking at slightly smaller physical shows, and so that problem goes away a little bit. However, I would caution event planners that think that to think through what actually planning a hybrid event involves. So building your agenda, you're going to be asking questions like, are you just going to live stream your physical sessions from your stages? And if so, how can you really allow your online participants to have meaningful engagement if you do that? Or are you going to run parallel physical and virtual agendas? If you do that, are you going to have any speakers who are both delivering physical sessions at the show and virtual sessions? And if you've got 2 separate agendas, how do you make sure that you're not going to have any speakers who are put in 2 places at once? Are your virtual sessions going to be live or pre-recorded? If they are live, are you going to organize speaker training so they understand how to use the virtual platform, and or rehearsals so their presentations are really slick? And if you do, then you potentially, for each session, you've now got to schedule 2 sessions or possibly 3. For pre-recorded sessions, are you going to schedule your pre-recording sessions? And also for pre-recorded sessions, are you also going to have live Q&A like this session? So for this session, I'm pre-recording it now, then I need to schedule in the time at which it's going to be delivered so I can be there live to answer the questions. So again, 2 sessions for the price of 1, more scheduling. And then live again, if you've got speakers who may be in a different time zone, how are you going to manage that? So it all adds up to new levels of scheduling complexity for hybrid events. And so this is challenging. So as humans, we've got these amazing things called brains, and they're great at doing this kind of stuff, kind of imaginative, creative, intuitive tasks. Great at being empathic, lateral thinking, spotting patterns, and making connections. And that's really good for kind of curating your event agenda, for kind of looking at the flow of it, and really kind of thinking about, it'd be great if this session's after that one, because this speaker's really exciting and that one's kind of whatever. It's the kind of giving it that extra kind of human touch. But do we really need to be burdened with the kind of double checking all these details of whether that speaker's going to be in a panel at the same time or not? And really, computers are far more accurate and faster at doing this, at applying complex rule sets or multiple constraints across a multi-dimensional data space. So really, smart agenda planning, the kind of philosophy behind it, the idea is that you use the best parts of the human brain and the best parts of computers, and you marry them together so your human event agenda planners are freed up to do the curation without having to spend hours being bad at organizing all the scheduling. And at Lineup Manager, this is our sort of starting philosophy. And then our starting point was the scheduling problem. Rather than saying this is a linear process, we started with the scheduling problem and then said, how do we get the data in that we need? And that meant that we kind of, the process is slightly different. So the smart agenda planning process might look something like this. So as an event planner, you model your event in software. You set up the dates, the places, venues, tracks, so the different themes for your event, labels, which can be whatever you need them to be for your own event, and then you can set up scheduling rules between different sessions, or to say, any sessions with these labels need to happen in these venues or at that time, or whatever you need. Once you've done that, you can then build smart forms that can capture the data from your speakers that you're going to need when you come to do your scheduling. And we'll look at all of this in a bit more detail in the case study. Once you've done that, you've now got the data and the rules that you need that mean that you can use AI to help you schedule the agenda. And I've put a sort of bi-directional arrow between these because elements of the kind of building the smart forms and capturing all that information, some of that may happen before or after starting to schedule the agenda, and some of those things could happen in parallel or simultaneously. Anyway, when you get to the end of all that, then again, you're publishing your data out to your event website or apps or signage and so on. Okay, so we're going to look in more detail at all of this process, but for now I just want to have a quick look at how this, what it looks like with this using AI to help you plan the agenda. Okay, so here's an agenda planner. We've got the columns are locations, and this is a hybrid event, so we've got some of those locations are virtual and some are physical. Time is going down the side. The colored blocks are the sessions. Some of them you can see have got a green stripe down one side. Some are amber and some are red. Now, that indicates their scheduling status. So the ones that have got a red stripe, there's a problem with those. So we're kind of hovering over one, this biosphere explained session. So we can just mouse over the information for that and see, we can see this is showing us the scheduling rules. There's a problem with one of them. We can drag and drop it elsewhere. And as we do, we see that some of these other times are grayed out. And that's because the AI is running in the background and it's saying, right, for this particular session, those gray times are no good, but this white one, that's going to work. So we can drop the session on there. It's actually gone amber, and that's because we now need to contact the speaker to tell them that we've moved their session and to ask them to confirm that they've seen that and they're okay with that new time. So that's one way of using it. So you manually move the sessions around and the AI works in the background and tells you, it gives you feedback. Another way you can do it is to basically use the AI to just plan your whole event agenda for you. So in this case, again, we've got our locations in the columns, time's going down the side. And on the right-hand side, we've got our list of unscheduled sessions. So we can scroll down here and see it's quite a big event. There are actually 180 sessions here. We're going to click this auto schedule button. And that's now going to run an algorithm in the background. It's going to go down through that list of all those unscheduled sessions, and it's going to try and find times and places on the agenda where those sessions can be allocated. This is slightly sped up. It actually took about 4 minutes to run this on this run. Once it's done, great, it's found times and places for all of those sessions. Some of them we still need to get back to the speakers to tell them the times. And now what we can do is, if you want to, we can manually manipulate this. So we could say, we can look down through all that agenda and think, well, I don't like that, I don't like this. And we can unschedule those sessions again, put them on the unscheduled list. We can pin things to the board when we like them. And then if we want, we can run the algorithm again and just replan the ones that need replanning, and we can kind of iterate on the schedule. So again, it's this pairing of the human curation with the scheduling being taken care of by the AI. Okay, so just to recap, smart agenda planning technology basically is kind of an integrated content gathering and agenda planning tools, and then just a bit of AI to help speed things up. And it helps you as an event planner to save loads of time and to stay in control of your agenda. It really helps you to avoid any mistakes creeping into your planning process. Okay, so we're going to look at Event Tech Live as a case study now. So Event Tech Live 2020, it was conceived as a hybrid event. When they were planning it back in March 2020 and we were going into lockdown, obviously they wanted to hedge against the possibility of the physical event not being able to run. It was planned to have 2 physical days, which was its normal pattern, or the pattern from the previous year. And then that was going to be augmented with 5 virtual days. The 2 physical days were going to have 5 stages, and then the 5 virtual days we're going to have 2 virtual spaces. And then about 6 weeks before the show, they made the decision to switch to 100% virtual because basically in the UK, we weren't allowed to run events, or weren't going to be allowed to run the event. The tech stack that they used, so for speaker management and agenda planning, they used us, Lineup Ninja. For registration and website, they used Events Case. For the one-to-one meetings app and for the virtual platform, they used Grip for the virtual platform that had the Glisser integration as well. And they used various other bits of tech for lots of other stuff, but these are the kind of key ones for us looking at the agenda side of things. Okay, so now we look in the kind of Lineup Ninja interface, and I'm going to use the process that I outlined before as the framework for how I'm describing what they've done. So they model their event. First of all, they set up the dates. They knew these were going to be the dates for the event. So they've set them up. And then they also set up things like, what's the default session duration going to be? What's the changeover time between sessions? Then they created the locations as well. So originally they set up these 5 stages for the physical ones and the 2, they're actually called live stage and other stage here, but these are the other virtual spaces. Originally for the physical locations, they had what we call a strong affinity. And that means basically some of the stages ran just some of the tracks. So for example, all the AR and artificial intelligence sessions would happen just on one stage. And the same thing with, polling, Q&As, solutions, wearables, they'd be on another stage. However, when they made the switch to completely virtual, that went out of the window, and basically they said all the tracks can be spread across the 2 virtual spaces. They then did some quite clever stuff with labels. So they kind of used labels to model some aspects of the event that they really wanted to control. So here what they've done is to create labels to capture who is going to ask to just deliver a physical session, because that's their preference, who's going to do a virtual session, and who's happy to do either. So then they can segment those and do some scheduling rules on them later. And then they had other labels for each of the event dates. So they had quite a lot of different labels for different things as well, but these are just a short selection of them. once they'd created the labels, that allowed them to do some interesting things. So they then created some scheduling rules. So this label is the one for Wednesday, the 4th of November. What they were then able to do is to link that label to the show date of the 4th of November. And then you can see with this green toggle, they've said that any sessions with that label need to be scheduled on that date. They could have said that any sessions with that label needed to be scheduled in that location, or they could have said things like the concurrency one just below the yellow box says there's currently no limit on the number of sessions with this label that can run at the same time. But they could have, for example, said anything with this label, we just want one of them running at any given time because we don't want our delegates to have to choose between different things. So there's lots of kind of scheduling rules options that they could choose from, and this is the way they chose to do it. This now meant that they've got their kind of labels that they created. This is like the kind of taxonomy that they've created for their own event. Like they've created their own kind of shape of the event, if you like. That now meant that they can build their smart forms to capture, so they can ask their submitters or their speakers to tell them which label they want to fit into, basically. So each of these questions is going to be used for labeling that submission with that label. So you can see that what they've done here is they've got this, please tell us your preference. I'd like to deliver a physical or virtual session, or I'm happy to do either. Below that, there's now a question, which days are you available to present? And so because the virtual event was spread across 5 days, they only want to present those options to people who are either said they want to present in the virtual event or they're happy to. And then also, those people who are presenting virtually potentially could be anywhere in the world. So the third question down asks those speakers, do you have a preference about morning or afternoon? Which one's going to fit the time zone that you're in best? Then these questions were only shown depending on which answer submitters had given to the first question. So if we look at the config for the second question down, like which days you're able to present, we can see it's got like a little display rule, which the ETL team configured, saying if their answer to the please tell us your preference is I'd like to deliver a virtual session, or I'm happy to be considered for both formats, in that case, then show them these 5 dates for the virtual event. And the same thing is true for the subsequent questions as well. I hope that's making sense. If I've gone through it a bit fast, just ask questions in the chat. I'll be more than happy to explain it in more detail, or less if that's what you need. Okay, so they've built their smart form. This is the one that they built for the open call for speakers. However, they were also running like an editorially generated list of or set of panel sessions. So what they were able to do was, after they'd configured their smart form for the call for speakers, they were then able to copy that whole form and create moderator invites and panelist invites, which are the sort of the two things you can see in blue at the bottom of the this golden square, if you like. Hope that's making sense. So the one that says Event Tech Live 2020 is the open call for speakers, and you can see they've had 140 submissions to that. And then the moderator invites and panelist invites are below. And here's just an example of one of the panel sessions where here's a panel session. It's got the title and they've already written the session description, and then they're linking it to this panelist invites. So they want to invite some panelists. And then they would just fill in the invited panelist name and email address, click on invite, and that invites those panelists, and they can see which session they've been invited as a panelist for. So this allows the Event Tech Live team to capture all of the information that they need, not just the content, not just people's offers, not just the editorially generated content and the speaker recruitment, but also all of that kind of information that's pertinent to the scheduling information. So they've got all the speakers to tag themselves, and they've built in their scheduling rules. That allows them to now do the kind of agenda planning side of things. And they opted for like the first method of manually curating the event, just manually scheduling the sessions and getting the feedback from the AI. So this first session here, how to utilize technology platforms to ensure your events are COVID safe. This is one that it's gone green because everything's fine with it. And in this example, they've configured the event to check that the speaker is available, that the location is available at that time, that the right track is associated with that location. They've also got labels around location scheduling to make sure that the speaker has booked a rehearsal, to make sure it's on the live stage, and also labels with date scheduling. This one is set to Wednesday the 4th because that was the only day that the speaker, Oliver Rowe, said they could do. So it's made sure that it's put it on the right day, and they won't accidentally schedule a session on a day when that speaker isn't going to be available. Which, having done that myself at an event that I planned, I can tell you it is embarrassing. It disappoints your attendees, it annoys your speakers, it can damage your reputation and relationships with your speakers. You'll also notice that there's a red session there as well. Now, what they did here was quite interesting. Essentially, because they haven't got the speaker details for this session yet, they've actually created a contradictory pair of rules. So they've said this session has to happen on the live stage and on the other stage. And so it's always going to fail one of those rules wherever they put it. And that's because they wanted to leave it red as a reminder that they still needed to get the speaker for this. So it's a little bit of a hack, but an interesting little use case for them. Once they got their first draft and they were happy with that, then they were able to publish the agenda. And so they did that through Lineup Ninja's kind of native mobile-first web application. So they could do like a rough draft agenda and put it on the website through that. And then also they configured as an integration between Lineup Ninja and Grip and Lineup Ninja and Events Case, so that the speaker's information can be populated into Grip and the agenda data can go onto the event website, which looks like this. So there it is up on the Event Tech Live website. And yeah, there it is. Looks lovely. Okay, so that was what kind of stuff they did. I guess you're probably more interested in what they thought about it. So I had a chat with Paul Allott, the event director, a couple of days ago, and this is what he told me. So he felt that it was straightforward to set it up. There was some learning investment needed to understand what the capabilities of the smart agenda planning technology is. And because they used it last year, they had a bit of an idea. But they needed a bit of a refresher, and some of the capability had grown since last year. So anyway, they needed to put a bit of time into invest to learn about it. They still felt that last year they saved 8 working days in the first year. And because they're a relatively small team, that meant that they could reallocate the person who had been spending all that time doing the scheduling onto some sales activity, and they actually were able to generate a few £1,000s of extra revenue just from selling some more exhibition space. So it was a win-win for them. And they feel that they made that saving in the first year. It's too early this year to say how much they've saved, but they do feel strongly that those savings accrue year on year. And also, as the learning investment pays off, that first year's learning investment pays off, then they're saving more each year. And also because they can reuse previous year's event configuration, so that kind of setup, they can reuse things like their call for speakers forms and all that kind of stuff. In summary, they felt that it's like a massive help in managing the complexity of a hybrid events agenda. And also when they had to make that switch from hybrid to 100% virtual, they felt that because everything was under control, they knew where all the data was, they knew that all their rules were in there. When they had to change the whole shape of the agenda from like this kind of five stages on 2 physical days, and that they were confident that they weren't going to have any problems arise. And finally, Paul gave me a nice little quote. So he said, "There's no way I'm not using Lineup Ninja next year," basically. So I'll just have like a final thought. So here's a quote that I found from John Pfeiffer, who's an author. In the interest of gender equality, let's say Homo sapien is a slow, sloppy, and brilliant thinker. If you've ever read this book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, you'll know exactly what he's on about here. So human brains, we're slow, we're sloppy, we take shortcuts, but we're brilliant in that we have these amazing kind of leaps of imagination. And in contrast, computers are very fast, very accurate, but kind of stupid. So what we're trying to achieve with smart agenda planning is making you the most brilliant, fast, and accurate event content manager that you can be, basically. Okay, that's all from me. Like I say, ask questions in the chat. I'll be hanging around for a little bit afterwards. And if you want to get in touch, you can ping me an email, joe@lineup.ninja. That's also our website address. Just go lineup.ninja, and you can find me on LinkedIn there. So yeah, feel free to get in touch. So thanks for your time. I've really enjoyed sharing this with you. Good luck planning your events.